Hey everybody, welcome to the new Hammers and Dice podcast episode. I'm Randy. I'm joined by Esteban and John tonight.
Hello, people.
Hello.
So this episode, we're going to be diving into list building, but not just here's my 3K list, but more like if you're starting a new Legion or mech army or solar army, just like, do you start with a theme? Do you start with a box set? And I think everybody kind of has their own way that they do it. So we're just going to kind of go into that and we're each going to talk about something that we've either theory crafted or created as one of our own lists and talk
Mm.
about our reasoning behind it, how we came up with it, and what we would do moving forward if we are going to build it up. So hopefully you guys are into that. But we'll get started with the new Heresy releases, or not releases, but reveals. It's been a month or so since our last podcast. There's been a lot of stuff. I literally built and painted an entire Titan since the last time we talked. My Warhound is finished. So
I was
it
gonna
has
say
been a while.
a while. Hold on, let's put this in context. You bought that right before LVO, and brought it back after LVO. Essentially, you've done that in record time, like 2 months, if that even. That is a great turnaround for Warhound. I expect to see a whole five Warhound mana pull for next LVO.
You know what? If people want to send me the money to pay for more Titans, I'll build them.
There we go. It'll be the five Warhound challenge. Can you build and paint five Warhounds in a year?
I mean, the interesting thing about it, because like I've done a few Forge World things. The biggest one I did before this was the Storm Eagle, which I don't know if it was necessarily harder than the Warhound. I think because it was my first big model, it was a little bit more of a challenge trying to figure out how resin worked and what to do with it. And also like the sides of it were had the resin warp and they're very long. So that was tricky. It was like trying to get the sides straight to keep that together. But I feel like having had that experience and then working with resin the last couple of years and knowing what to expect, because Forge World's instructions for their big models are, if anybody doesn't know this, hasn't worked with their stuff, their instructions are terrible. There's like 6 pages of instructions for a model that easily could have like 20 pages of instruction. And they're like skipping steps. It'll say like, here's what to do, and then it'll show you a picture. And there's a bunch of things on the picture that they don't show you what they did. It's just like, oh, and all of these pieces are on the model now. It's like, oh, so like the instructions that you wrote is here what's to do, and then here there's a lot of missing steps in there.
Mhm.
Um, so I
Yeah.
think knowing in advance that that's how it works made it easier. Not that it was easy. It was a big challenge, and it legitimately took me the whole month and a half to actually do it. But the important thing was like you taking your time, knowing what to expect, and also weirdly because of the chunks are so big and heavy, there wasn't quite as much resin warp as some of the other stuff I've worked with.
Mhm.
There was only one big chunk that had warp that I had to really try to get out and shave down. The trickiest part was probably the legs because there's a shit ton of pieces in that box, and probably 3/4 of them are bits for the legs.
Mhm.
And there's bits you have to like cut to size, and it's really hard to dry fit the legs because there's so many pieces. They're crumbling in your hand as you're trying to put them in the right place and see where they fit. And then also making sure it's balanced well enough because the thing is very heavy. So that was the hardest part was the posture and the legs and getting that right. Because I also didn't just want to have like the static two legs standing without any motion pose. Because for me, that's like you're spending all this money on this model that it looks very dull when you do that. For me personally,
Mhm.
so I wanted it to feel like it had a little bit of movement to it. So that was a challenge I put to myself, which did not make it easy. But
I'll
I'm
say you
actually
should
very
have
happy
gone with
with how it
the
turned
uh, the
out.
brass rod trick. Just put a really thick 2 millimeter thick brass rod through every piece and bend it and solder it to the joints.
I did actually put rods through the legs.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
I don't know if I did it the right way because I've never actually done rods before, but I put rods in almost all the major leg joints to try to keep them in place. Because that was one of the things, like some of the things I've read is like, yeah, these things are very heavy, and if you don't have the right support, they'll start warping. They'll start, they're not designed super well.
I hope you did do them well, and I guess time will tell, or the
Yeah,
first accidental nudge onto the gaming surface. Hopefully, not
we'll
off
find
the
out.
table.
Yeah. I have not played with it yet. I'm fully expecting it to explode in turn one of the first game. No doubt that that's going to happen. Uh,
both both as a gaming piece and as in the game. So it'll explode. You'll take it off the table and then Butterfinger it onto the floor, and it'll
yeah, it'll,
explode
it'll
into a billion
explode
pieces.
twice, and then again in my heart.
Again sincerely hope that doesn't happen, but I think we've all heard the horror stories of expensive Forge World models being dropped from unreasonable heights.
Yes, and resin definitely explodes on impact.
Oh, it doesn't explode. It wills itself into a new form and just decides to shatter so that it can cut you even more as punishment for dropping it.
Also, if anybody wants to comment and shame John for not building his Reaver Titan,
Yeah,
he can talk to
this
that.
this conversation of building the Warhound just makes me not want to do it or push it back. Yeah,
Three
maybe
more
another year.
years.
3 more years.
John, come on. Just I already said so, man. You just got to start little piece by little piece. You don't we're not asking you to complete it. We just want you to start it.
It's opportunity cost. Like I'm painting some Sons of Horus right now. Like if I'm working on the Reaver, that means I'm not painting Sons of Horus.
That is fair.
Okay.
You could
That's
also balance it out. So what I did when I was building the Warhound was I would get through a chunk of it and then I would paint something else and I would go back.
Mm,
Like so it kind of helped keep me sane. At least until you get to a point where you're like you see the finish line and you're all right, I'm
go
gonna
for it.
get through this.
Yeah.
I'm gonna finish it. But up until that point, you definitely need something to keep you motivated because it definitely is a grind. And the Reaver, I'm sure, is an
Yeah.
even
I can imagine.
more
Ugh.
stressful proposition than the Warhound.
Hmm.
But
One day. One day.
one
Not
one
today.
day in the far future.
not
The
today,
Um,
grim
not
darkness
tomorrow, not next
John's
week.
Reaver will be constructed.
Speaking of Titans, is actually a perfect segue into the one of the first previews since our last. And I think it actually dropped the day I dropped our new episode, or the day after we recorded. Was the Secretary Axiarch,
Yeah.
Oh, yes. I
which is a
actually really
beautiful
like
fucking
this
model.
model. Yes, no, he is so cool looking. I don't know why we haven't gotten him earlier, but he just has such a nice feel to him. I mean, if you look at him, he has a shield made from a piece of Titan. That's his the what do you call it? I can't word now. The piece of art, the Titan shard armor that he's
Yeah.
got, and
Hmm.
it looks like an actual piece of armor. Like it looks like it's like a maniple piece or like an armor plating piece that's been transformed into the shield. His segmented armor, he looks like he's kind of like at ease or at attention. The service coming out, he just looks like such a beautiful model. I'm ashamed this isn't in plastic, honestly.
This
Yeah.
it's yeah. Unfortunately.
And like, we've actually talked about the Secretary a lot, not on the podcast, I think, actually, but we've had a lot of conversations about it where it's kind of frustrating because the Secretary are really cool, but if you take them as a detachment, none of their units have line.
Yeah.
So it would be really cool to run a Titan Legion detachment. And now that I actually have the Warhound built, I'm very tempted. But to make a whole list that can't score, and it's all resin right now and very expensive, that just feels so wrong.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
agree.
but I mean, you can always take a patrol detachment of Mechanicum, bring a bunch of servitors. Those are in plastic now.
Yeah. The problem with that, and I think this is one of those things where I think almost any event organizer or any, chill game wouldn't care about this. But technically, you're not supposed to run allied mech attachments next to each other. So it's one of those things where I feel like almost anyone would be like, screw it, who cares? Do it. But
For
you never
Titans,
know.
yeah, I'll lay a Titan Legion in. But it's weird because there's a mech rite of war that lets you ally mech in.
Oh, there is?
Yeah, one of the One of the, if you go back to our mech episode, we were talking about Cybernetica and Myrmidax. There's one where the main draw of it is you could get another allied mech detachment.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah. Is it worth it to run Sekitari? I don't know, but yeah, that is a possibility.
I mean, if you're running them with a Titan,
Yeah,
like
it
it's
should be. Yeah,
by
uh,
themselves, it would be like, why are they here? You
yeah.
know?
Mhm.
Now this guy though,
He's
if you
beautiful.
like Myrmidons, he has a very specific combo with Myrmidons where he gives them preferred enemy. So now you're rerolling ones on your plasmas.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty disgusting.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, like all those strength 6, AP 4, breaching 4 up, 6 shots per Myrmidon plasma shots, and reroll ones to hit. So you pretty much never get hot and you hit on twos.
Mhm.
Pretty gross.
Like
Oh,
Beto's white scars by plasma. They're disgusting.
Yeah.
yeah. All right. So
uh,
what was next on the list?
Next on this is actually a lot of Mechanicum stuff. But the next one is another resin character, the Arquitor Magisterum,
Oh
which
yeah.
she's a pretty cool looking model too. You know, I would be tempted if I was going to do a mech army, I would be tempted to run her as my warlord.
Yeah, I was gonna say as a filthy trader, that unit is loyalist only, but I could definitely see myself using one as like an Archmagos or Magos.
Mm. Yeah, it's a super cool model. Although I will say my Necromunda group saw this and we immediately everyone was like, "Ooh, we're hijacking this. We want to use this in our Necromunda campaign."
I
So
mean, every
that's what that
model is an
every
Necromunda model.
yes, John, every model. I just like this little scribe dude. I mean,
Yeah.
he's this pudgy little round guy with a little quill. He's got his mask on, a little weird thing on his back. He's just adorable. I'm like, yes, this is the perfect little servitor scribe here. Why don't we have more of this? But I'm a fan of the small guy. Don't get me wrong, Lady Punisher, Assassin of the Tech Priest also looks cool, and the details are insane. Although I'm not a big fan, to be honest, of the servo claws up top. They look kind of out of place for her.
Yeah, I mean, but those would be so easy to just chop off and replace with whatever, you know,
Yeah.
or even
Uh,
just sand it down and just have her shoulders.
Yeah, again, I think it's just the posing of them because they're so tall and just straight up. I usually think of mechas always having a bit more of a hunched pose, so her having a very elegant straight up profile and these two servo claws like kind of just straight up vertical just kind of gives it a profile that I'm not used to seeing in mech.
Yeah.
That's fair. Yeah.
But that's what I like because it's different because there is supposed to be that mech faction, which hopefully will have an Ark and Land model at some point. But like there is that faction of mech where they're like, well, the Emperor is the Omnissiah and he doesn't have any visible crazy mech stuff. So why should we all have that? You know, there is that
Mhm.
kind of faction that we haven't seen on the tabletop of the mech people who, you know, they still have their augmentations, but they still look very human.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That makes sense.
So I feel like she could be a representative of that as someone who has retained more of her humanity as a big mech character.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see that. I do say that that pistol looks amazing though. I think I might hijack that and try to make like mold copies of it for a Moritat, or not a Moritat, for Archaeotech pistols on Predators.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
Just it has such a nice profile to it.
Yeah. And then the next thing is the tanks, the Krios and the Karaknos,
Oh yeah,
which we also talked about in our
Yeah.
like episodes.
We really like the Krios lightning cannon.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, large blast rending 4 up. Yeah.
Hmm.
And they're plastic.
They're plastic now.
They're
They're
finally plastic.
yeah, and because they're and I think they're actually out now, the Mechanicum Heavy Support Force
Yeah, I believe the box is already out at time of recording.
Box
boxes.
out. We haven't received word on whether or not the small tank, what the pricing of the small tank is, but it obviously will be coming. I am gonna say I'm not looking forward to trying to source these because I do want to pick up three. I'm going to have held because everyone's probably gonna need three. So I'm hoping GW is getting their plastic extruders all warmed up for making a whole bunch of these for distribution.
Yeah. Well, the nice thing is, at least initially, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people buying the box and splitting it up and selling them individually. So there's a you'll be able to get some.
I don't know if people are actually going to be doing that, to be honest. I mean,
I mean, they've done it with all the other boxes.
Right, but these three pieces that come in the box, the Thanatar, the Krios, and the Krakenos, they're all such good, unique pieces. Anyone who's starting mech will definitely want to keep all of them. And people who have one of these items probably already have the others too if they were playing mech, which means they're probably not picking up the box. So that's what I'm thinking. Like people off selling these off parts probably isn't going to be as common as the other box where everyone was getting rid of the servitors or the tank, the transport tank, since those weren't really high value items in lists, generally speaking.
Yeah, I'm
Because
still seeing the thralls online. Everyone trying to get to offload
right,
their tech
but
thrall.
you don't see spare Kalaxes or Castellix or Thalax models, right? Because everyone needed like at least 3 or 4 boxes of those. So
Yeah.
that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Like
We'll
this
see.
kind of because this honestly this is the better box, and this is proof of just how awesome it is because you get the 3 Krios variants, which I will say I think the Pulsar is the better choice only because 4 shots at strength 9 AP2 all ordnance just seems better than the lightning blast cannon. But that's only because I imagine that as being the like pinnacle of dreadnought killing technology at this point.
I think Mech has better access to anti-tank, but I think it's pretty solid. It's just like unexciting. It's 4 last cannon shots, like hooray, last cannons.
Ordnance
But
last cannon shots though.
the which is the same thing.
Well, it's a little different because you roll so instead of re-rolling, you roll the two dice
Is
together
pick the highest, right?
and pick
Yeah.
the highest, which on the face of it, you're like, oh, there's not that big of a difference. But there is so if, for instance, you're rolling a regular las cannon and you get a 5, and it's like let's say you're trying to pierce a land raider, right? You roll a 5.
Uh-huh.
You can choose to re-roll the glance and try to get a pen, but the chances are you're probably not gonna do anything. If you're rolling both together, you could get a glance and a pen and then choose the pen. So like it slightly improves your odds of like getting a pen and not having to like chance the reroll if you get a glance.
I see
So
what you mean. Yeah,
it is
yeah,
it is I mean practically you're probably not gonna notice that much of a difference, but
yeah.
like theoretically, statistically, there is a little bit of an edge to doing it that way.
That's fair.
And then the next release that we have, this is the big one that kind of came out of nowhere, Demonic Engron,
Woo,
which
Engron.
we were like theory crafting like crazy about Fulgrim last time. And I think this kind of proved a lot of the theories we were talking about wrong. It definitely was not. I don't know if I think it was maybe Reed who thought maybe he was trying to give them the benefit of the doubt, be like, maybe they had already crafted it and they're like, screw it, we'll just release it anyways. But no, there's no way that this was like that. They definitely are planning to do resin and plastic for all the demonic Primarchs.
hmm Yeah.
This was, I think, the proof beyond shadow of a
Oh,
doubt that is their plan.
100%.
Mm-hmm,
100%.
mm-hmm.
Which is an interesting choice. I feel the same about this as I do about Fulgrim, which I think this is a beautiful model that I would never buy. And if I was gonna run Angron, I would use the plastic one. I think this one's cooler, but I would never risk him on a tabletop, you know?
Yeah, he's definitely a showpiece, not a gaming
That
piece.
that that model makes me want to play World Eaters.
No,
Like
it's beautiful. I
it's
mean,
so cool. I didn't understand this debate of like 30K versus 40K model,
Yeah.
but I think this model is like, okay, this is a 30K Angron and the 40K one is a 40K Angron because this model looks more like human Angron, which
Yeah.
makes sense because he's only been a demon for like apparently like I think this is like Eve of Siege of Terra Angron, so he's been a demon for like 7 years, for pretty much the whole heresy.
Yeah, because he
Um,
becomes a demon fairly early on
early,
because
early, yeah, it's like a year in the Shadow Crusade,
yeah,
right after
when they're
Cal.
fighting in Ultramar.
Yeah.
yeah. So
And
like 3, 4 years into the horror heresy.
there's some weird fluff inconsistencies. I was talking to Reed about it, about how like his sword. Apparently, the article says that his weapons are just generic like weapons, but in the books he gets the black blade from Sauron, which is mentioned as like a thing. So I don't know why they're just like, oh, they're just random weapons he doesn't care about.
It could be a loss in translation thing with the social team. I feel like every once in a while they don't have the full story for models and they write things that are inaccurate. So
I
that could be the case.
I disagree with once in a while. I think it happens like a lot.
I'm
So
trying to give them the benefit of the
definitely agreeing with you. Yeah, I think it
doubt.
happens a lot. The
Because yeah,
social team does not just make
Yeah.
stuff up all the time.
I think the social team are do not know the lore at all and don't really. To be a little bit more blunt, I think they just kind of take whatever they're given and they try to spin it whatever way they know how, which
Yeah,
does not always jive with the community who actually knows
yeah.
what they're talking about.
Right. Although
Unfortunately.
I do just love the detail on his base, especially with this absolutely murdered Blood Angel here. He looks so baller, honestly. Just this model. I wish we had a better close up of him because he just looks so
Yeah.
cool.
Mark IV Blood Angel, that one.
I don't know if
Review new
he's
Mark
Mark
IV armor.
IV.
I think
It's
it's Mark IV.
hard. It's so hard to tell because they only show like, such a decent shot of him. And even the video doesn't
Yeah.
really go and show
Mhm.
much beyond that.
It
Um,
looks like it's an artificer armor model. It does like looking zooming in a little bit,
Uh-huh.
it doesn't seem like it's any specific armor mark. There's a
yeah.
little bit of Mark 6 in there. There's a little bit of Mark 3 in there.
Hmm.
I
So
would
it's Mark
say this
V,
is
is what you're saying.
meant to represent a character, which is actually pretty cool. The fact that
Yeah,
it's like a Centurion type
yeah.
character
Not just a
in
attack
the
marine.
base.
Yeah, I mean, there's the banner in the background. There's the shield. He's on this like walkway plinth, which is probably just the siege of Terra, the
Yeah,
ruins of the Imperial Palace, all the skulls. Anger himself is just adorned with a bunch of chain skulls. It again, just the whole thing just wraps up so well, and that this model is like the second centerpiece for it. It's like here's Angron, here's who you're looking at. You look down, look at this beautiful Blood Angel that has been destroyed. He's the second focal point, and it's just so nice artistically speaking.
Yeah.
yeah.
I,
I might pick that up and play with it.
I mean, this angle and the picture of the wings, it's hard to tell, but I do think that they made the wings lighter. It looks like there's not as much mass to them,
Yeah.
which I'm wondering if that was a response to the complaints about Fulgrim's wings being too heavy. I wonder if they made the wings a little bit more raggedy and a little less heavy as a way to like balance out the weight of them.
I could see that.
Perhaps it is kind of awkward seeing how high threshed these are. Like they're going straight up and then out, which is probably better for like model movement, as now you can just kind of grab onto Angron directly or his basing material rather than trying to finicky around his wings.
And you can
So
also
it's sort of
pin them easier too, I imagine, the way that they're
Hmm.
vertically placed. Yeah, I mean all the weight will be going straight down, so pinning will probably be more successful than the Fulgrim model, which I know the wings were kind of splayed outward horizontally, which means you're putting a lot more stress on it on the joint connection. So
yeah.
hopefully this is an easier model to assemble and put together. Not, I don't have an experience with it, but I know the wings have been one of the more difficult things for people who do own them. So hopefully this is an improvement, or at least something easier to pin, because they look a little bulkier at the base, because it looks like it's like almost an arm thickness here at the bottom.
There's also like so many spiky things that I feel like will be so easy to just snap while you're building it.
Yeah.
I would be so terrified. I'd rather build
Snap.
another Titan.
I'm less worried about snapping and more worried about Angron drawing some blood for whoever builds him. Like you're
As
going to be
intended.
building this, you're going to be bleeding this model, and Korn will have his blood.
I do like that. I think the worst part of Fulgrim's model is the spear, because like the wings you could finagle with, but the spear you're just screwed. Like something that long and thin in resin, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
at least he just has his sword and axe, which great.
Yeah.
Axe
And it
honestly might
also
be
would be easier if there's a little bit of warping to fix. That spear, I feel like you're guaranteed to have warp issues.
Oh, I think the official model, it's like kind of warped anyway,
Yeah.
or the official art or official pictures. I mean,
I
but
think
yeah,
you're right. Yeah, and then I think Angron's axe is just asking for a snap point because it looks like it's just the very head is heavy kind of ish, and it looks a little thin there. I think that's going to be a snapping point for it. But at least it's on a heftier piece of resin, looks like, so maybe that'll be easy-ish to fix if it ever does break.
Yeah. He does seem like a more solid model than Fulgrim. So we'll see. I can't wait to see somebody else buy it and paint it. Hopefully, I'll see somebody else take one to an event. Then I can
I'll
see.
do it. I'll do it. But John, what about your Warhound? I'll do it.
If
Forget the Warhound getting run.
you're not gonna do your Reaver, then you got to do
Oh,
demonic.
sorry, Reaver. Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
do Demon Ing run.
And then also, even more of a surprise than Angron was Lotara Surin getting a model.
Oh my god, I forgot the model got announced.
I was
Which,
gonna say that.
think of it.
Look, I'm disappointing you, John, because she is the number two favorite World Eaters character. Number one being Karn, of course, and Angron being a distant fourth.
Dude, her model is like not. It doesn't look like any of the art, which annoys me.
Yeah.
But
I
it's
think the
okay.
model, like I don't
Whatever.
dislike the model, but yeah, it doesn't feel like her character from the book as much. But the thing that I like the most about it isn't even that it's a model, isn't even that it's her. I feel like this is, as far as I can recall, this is the first model we've gotten that is specifically meant to be a Zone Mortalis model, which gets me a little bit excited for like, are they
Mm,
doing some sort
yeah,
of expansion with Zone Mortalis? We're gonna get some more Zone Mortalis specific models because that would be awesome. And we
that
haven't
would be
really
cool.
done a full Zone Mortalis episode yet, but I love Zone Mortalis. It's so much fun to play.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the more unique Warhammer game types I've played, and they also enjoyed it quite a bit.
I was gonna say,
So
I do believe her announcement of model was purely because of the play on Valentine's Day. The power couple of 30K universe. I mean, it's kind of funny in that respect. Although I do find it kind of odd that we get her as the model as opposed to a lot of other more interesting and tabletop combat interesting characters we could be getting. But she's still an interesting model, I think. It's still a very unique and cool character for World Eaters. Again, second, probably perhaps their second favorite character in all of Heresy as far as World Eater players are concerned.
Okay, Loki, the more I look at this model, the more I kind of hate it. Like the pose makes no sense for the character. Like she's a very calm, collected. I mean, she gets pissed once in a while, but she never like raises her sword and screams at the enemy like ever.
also
In the
her
book.
base has like nothing on it.
Her what?
Her base, like
Yeah,
it's like it looks like it has like crumbs on it. I'm like,
yeah.
she couldn't be standing at like a computer station type thing, like
Also,
a
the handprint is tiny, unless she's like 10 feet tall. you know, like that's supposed to be Angron's hand. Even if it's a Space Marine's hand on the shirt, like that's way too small.
I should be covering like her entire chest.
Exactly. So
Might in this case might be like the painting team didn't was trying to get the impression of a hand but couldn't make it too big. So it might just be an indicator
Yeah,
of
that is definitely
limitations
a
of the
painted hand. I
model.
don't think that that's like actually part of the model. So
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely make that
but
a counter if you were going to get her. But yeah, I'm more excited by what their model represents
yep.
in terms of like the Zone Mortalis stuff than the model itself. I also would be fascinated to know like because it says in the article, and again, who knows how much the social team actually knows. But it sounds like her rules are going to be really interesting for what she can do in Zone Mortalis.
Mm-hmm.
Because right now, there's no characters that have, or there's nothing that really has an impact in Zone Mortalis other than just characters kind of doing what they normally do in any given game.
Mm-hmm.
But regardless, she is a very nice, detailed model. I can imagine
Yeah.
people easily just taking this and turning it into an Axilla or Soul or Militia model for them because it just looks so nice.
Oh yeah, she could easily be a Solar Ox,
Yeah.
character, especially if you're doing like a Legion Auxilia for World.
Mm-hmm. For world leaders, yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, let's move on to the next. Only two more releases or reveals. The Ursarax cohort is next,
Yeah.
which these guys look really cool.
Yeah. As the mech player, that unit is garbage, but those models are so cool. I am picking up a box immediately. They're so cool.
No,
Like
yeah, they
Thalax with claws and jump packs. Like, yes, please.
yeah, no, I'm actually curious to see how much of the Thalax kit is in this because it looks like it's really close to the original Thalax kit. So I'm wondering if it is just the sprue change of taking out the weapon sprue and putting this in there instead.
I think the jetpack is different. So I actually don't have the Thalax kit, so I don't know if the jetpack's a separate sprue, but they do have different jetpacks. So maybe if they're a separate sprue, then I mean I either way, I'm assuming they're sharing some stuff because the body is just a Thalax.
Yeah, no, I wish I remembered because I built 12 of them, but
Mm-hmm.
I built them in a somewhat fugued, like tired state, so I
Yeah.
don't remember what was on what sprues. I'm pretty
Fair.
sure the jetpack was like two pieces on the main body sprue. So
Oh, okay.
I think again, like I said, I don't know what would be taking if it's like a brand new like mold that just happens to have the same sculpts of the legs, just kind of repositioned to make room, or if it will maybe just be like the Thalax body kit, and then these jump packs are on the other, and they tell you, hey, use this piece, but don't use that piece.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Especially because the head is so different from the regular Thalaxes. So it's like arms, head, backpack, different, but everything else is about the same.
I think
With
the chest is different too. The chest has the Iron Man laser.
that's right, yeah, it's the IRAD. Is it the Volkite? No, it's the Volkite
It's the
card.
Volkite thingy. Yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean, I imagine it's probably similar to like the difference between the Mark 6 and Mark 3, where they're very similar in a lot of ways, but they're put together slightly differently.
Hmm.
Like they're built in a way where you can't easily swap them together.
Yeah, I could see that.
yeah, I could definitely see that as well. You're right.
But yeah. And then the last but not least, Katie's Next, our first Raven Guard character model ever.
Hooray! Okay.
I gotta say, I think he looks cool. I love the iconography. There's one thing that bugs me about this model, and it's the pose. He's supposed to be this badass gunslinging guy, and the fact that he's just got one hand holding his cape, to me, is just a little goofy.
That's didn't even notice holding escape. That's pretty funny.
I actually
You
didn't
know?
realize that he was holding his cape. I thought his hand was just kind of like getting ready to draw his pistol, but now that you mention it, you're right. It does.
I,
He's just grabbing the cape. It looks like.
and this would have been such a perfect opportunity to have a cool gunslinging character, dual wielding pistol moment, which I feel like a lot of the characters that we've seen recently have been in this kind of hero pose as opposed to an action pose, which I don't have anything against the hero pose, but it'd be nice to have a little bit more variety. You
Hmm.
So I know people have been mentioning this before. They're saying um, the heresy in the last, since Heresy 2.0 dropped, a lot of the poses have switched from the more dynamic to kind of this more heroic pose, and maybe that's intentional. They want to make it a look a little bit more heroic because this is 32 millimeter scale, heroic. I would love to have seen him like maybe in like a slightly charging stance, or as you said, a dual gunslinger stance, kind of like the jump pack Mortet, where he's dual wielding his pistols and one is aimed and one's at the ready pointing up. Um, but he still looks really cool, especially considering like I think the purpose of the pose is more to show off how much detail is on his chest and leg plating. Like if you had him in an actual firing pose, I think a lot of that detail would be obscured. But this pose lets kind of his entire armor panoply expose itself and kind of lets all that detail show up. So I think there is a reason for it. Maybe it doesn't fit the character quite well, but it does suit the model really well, especially because that chest has so many details to it. It just looks very interesting to look at. So I don't think it doesn't that I don't think it's that it's a bad pose, but I
Yeah.
think it's done for a reason in this case.
But if you look at, for instance, Endred Har's model, the one which again wasn't too long ago. That was last year.
Hmm.
That model has
That's
an
dynamic.
awesome pose, and you can fully see every, aspect of his armor in his pose.
Right, and that works for him definitely great. And again, they could have easily have done something here, but again, I think it's just they chose to go this route just to make it easy on themselves, or just to kind of emphasize that this is a character who's kind of maybe in a stalker mode because he's in the lore from what I've briefly read because I had to actually read up about him. He's described as kind of this wayward character in the Raven Guard, kind of joined by perchance because he was a murderer and Korax happened to just let him join for whatever reason, and he became kind of his right hand shadow man. So he's got this very boding kind of cold look, and I think that works a little bit more with his character than say a gunslinger pose at this point. Again, not that I wouldn't have preferred a gunslinger pose, but I also don't play Raven Guard, so no, I don't have a ballot in this fight really.
Yeah. You also could run him in the Black Shields. So
That's true.
Hmm.
nice that they're getting a little bit more flavor. I'm looking forward to, I don't think there's anyone in our community who's really done Black Shields yet. I would love to see, someone take on a Black Shields list at some point. I think that would be a fun bit of flavor to add.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that is the last release. We'll see if we get something new this Thursday. But I'm overall I'm very happy with that. I think it's amazing that we're getting more plastic mech stuff. The characters overall I think are looking great, and it's all just more heresy, which is exactly what we want. You know.
Hmm. That's always a
Yes.
good thing.
So let's move on to the meat of the episode. You could be coming to this as either a veteran Heresy player who's looking to start a new list, or if you're jumping into Heresy and you're like, where do I start? The goal of this is, regardless of where you're starting from, this could be helpful for you to figure out where you want to go with your next army. So we'll be talking a lot about theme, about how to economically get your models for your list, if that plays into the theme that you're building, which, and again, anything's valid, you know, however you want to play with your toy soldiers is up to you. This is, I think we're probably each gonna have our own take, and you can hopefully cherry pick what you like from whatever each of us says and kind of go your own way with it. Do either of you guys want to start, or should I start it off?
I wouldn't mind starting off if you don't
All right.
mind
Go
me.
for it.
I think mine's is probably like the weakest one and also the easiest to explain. It's always how to make your buck go the furthest. For this example, I'm going to be using Mechanicum only because that is my expansion goal right now. Is I want to have a second list. I'm building Mechanicum. I'm trying to figure out how to do it on the cheap. So first things first is when is a good time to get into an army, and it's usually when GW releases a good box. So my basis of box is basically off of the Mechanicum battle group, and then the Christmas Night Questoris box that we got in 2024, so just recently. So GW does this like once or twice a year where they drop boxes. These can be really great steals, especially the Mechanicum battle box, as you are basically getting essentially a whole model kit free. And in the case of the Knight Questoris box group, I believe you were getting almost a pair of armigers free for this. So to pull up my list and describe it briefly, um, it's going off the idea of starting off from those two boxes. So with that in mind, the head of the army is going to be your knights. It's going to be your one big knight and your four armigers forming up the core, which is almost half of your points already. And then you're just needing to use the battle box and then an extra box of Castellix, an extra box of Thalaxes, and then finding whoever you need to run as your tech priest models and Arc Magos on a bait. Oh, and of course the Thanatar Siege Automata, the great little plasma boy. Um, Overall, this is like about $700, I think, once you put it all together, and that is GW pricing. The thing is armigers and the knights, the big knight is really easy to find online. You can definitely get them on the cheap since they are a fairly, even though they're fairly new, there are tons of them all around. People are using them in 40K a lot and are cycling in and out of the army pretty effectively. So finding them on the cheap is not that hard either. So even if you didn't get a chance to get the Christmas box, finding armigers on the cheap, finding a knight on the cheap, not hard at all.
Also,
And
just a quick
again,
note,
oh,
they've done that, the Questor's Night Christmas box, they've done it a couple times.
Yeah.
So it is
yeah,
one of those, because I got it initially like 2 or 3 years ago.
right.
So I think they cycle it through every year or so. So it's one of those things where if you're ever interested in this and you don't necessarily have a timeline, you can always keep an eye out for the next time they bring that box up, because I do think that they just cycle that box through.
Correct. I think we've had it twice now. I think it was 2022 and then 24 again last time we got it. I don't know if they'll ever do it again. They probably will, or at least some variation of it. But this list works essentially great as just, hey, I want to have a little bit of everything. I want to just build a basic list. And that's what it is. Now, this same philosophy can be applied to Marines, it can be applied to Solar Auxilia, to militia. It's find a really big deal box that GW is doing, and then build off of that and figure out where it fits. And in this case, it just happens to fit because you can do Questoris with Allied Mechanicum pretty easy, and it works thematically because, as we all know, Mechanicum and Knights were flipping both sides of the heresy pretty often. So have running this as a trader force or running this as a loyalist force is very easy. And perhaps more importantly, switching out portions of this for other stuff if you don't have it on the cheap or you want something very specific is fairly easy. Not running to, if you don't want to run Cybernetica, you can easily switch out the Castellixes for Myrmidons or something if you want, if you're willing to spend out for that, or if you have a proxy alternative or some kind of conversion you have in mind. Don't want to run the Siege Thanatar, you can run the Thalax from the new kit, or if you want to run a bigger tank, you can run those if you have them. You can easily just drop all the knights if you don't like knights at all and go with some of the new Hell Demon stuff from the Dark Mechanicum stuff. If you happen to have a Brass Scorpion lying around, that's easily half of the knight stuff, and that then you can just fill up with other items that you can find. So that's mine. It's find two big boxes of great deal stuff from GW and go from there.
Do you have a specific uh Forge World that you would want to theme it on, or like a battle that you would want to theme it on, or like a night house? Like how would you go about your next step building it? What would be the part that you would do with that?
Actually, I actually do have it already built out. I'm showing it on screen as best I can, but I have everything in here already. So that was the purpose of it, is that I can actually do this right now because I happen to have a bunch of knights um, from a friend of mine who sold them to me. So
Right.
I had everything there. So all in all, I think I've spent about exactly $600 on this list, and that is 3,000 points right there. So this is the dirt cheap method that I was talking about. As far as what it refers to, this is specifically supposed to be Siege of Terra because this is for John as he's running here. He teased the Siege of Terra list. There were a bunch of rogue elements throughout the Siege of Terra. This could have easily been either Trader Force, siege going to the what is it? The Mortis, not Mortis Wall, Ultima Wall in the book Mortis. I'm bad with my lore. Sorry,
Oh, good.
John. John, you
Yeah,
remember
the Mercury Exultant Kill Zone. I believe
Mercury
it is the
Exultant Kill
Ultima
Zone.
Wall. Yeah.
They had tons of Knights and Mechanica there, so this could easily be that Trader Force there, helping run up alongside Mortis. This could also be the same force on the opposite end of the Loyalist, helping to protect the Loyalist Titan machines on the ground, keeping them from being overswarmed by Trader forces or any other part of the heresy, because Mechanicum forces were everywhere. The focus of the heresy was just mostly marine on marine combat, but there were tons of incidences where Forge Worlds became under attack from either Loyalist or Trader forces as they tried to secure those Forge Worlds for production and for their resources. So this could easily be anything in the heresy, honestly. It's very generic, not necessarily flavored, but very much in line with, hey, the Mechanicum were very much a part of this. They were there, maybe not as the focus of the highlight, but they were there fighting as hard as the Marines were.
And there's a lot of cool lore from the Siege of Terra books of like the traitor mech kind of just going batshit crazy on Terra.
Mm-hmm.
It's like charging headlong towards the walls. And like there's descriptions of like loyalist warhounds basically being like crucified as if they were human bodies. And just crazy shit like that. That's like just really cool. That kind of shows you that the mech were just as drunk on chaos power as all the Space Marines were.
Exactly, yeah. And this list could easily flip and change to either side. It's not really dedicated to any one thing. And again, it's very easy if you want to just to swap things out for other items. Since this nothing here is absolutely required to make this list work. It's very much an all comers. It does well against anything. If it's a tank heavy list, it's got anti tank to deal with it. If it's a big heavy marine list, it's got a bunch of AP3 and AP2 to deal with that. Dealing with the close combat army, it's got enough mobility in it to kind of skirt around them, which I will say as mech, they do suffer in close combat, so that is their weakest point. there's no solving that, as John knows, no doubt. So yeah, that is my list. Keep it cheap, keep it simple, keep it down to like a couple purchases and barter for the rest.
And then you showed us an Archmagos Prime that you were working on a while ago, I think, right?
Yes, so that is the most expensive part, I want to say, because that is legitimately more expensive than the knight I bought. It is two kits that I smashed together. Now, you do not have to do this. I will warn all of our listeners. Find what works best for you as an Archmagos. I took the Iron Strider, I think he's called, and then one of the Tech Magus Ballista, or one of the floating guys, smashed them together and made a cool kit. About $130 went into this one model, which is ridiculous, and a lot of green stuff and pain and suffering and some cut fingers because I accidentally slipped the blade twice when building it.
I mean,
But
who hasn't cut themselves in this hobby? I mean, that's
right, if you haven't nicked yourself at least once, are you truly a hobbyist?
yeah. I mean, you also, if you want to go the more generic route, they do have an Archimagos Prime model, $38, the new plastic one. Um,
that is
or
true. That again, very easy to find a lot of pieces and get everything all around here. Tech priest models are easy. Again, the list is taking everything from the box and using it. The only thing I'm not using in this list is 10 servo automata, or 10 servo automata, so 10 of the little servitor guys with last locks, and then the transport tank, which again, only because I don't really like that transport tank at all. I'm still trying to get rid of it. No one wants them. So you could easily just slack it in here for in exchange for a armor if you haven't been able to find one, and use it to transport a unit of your Thalaxes or that uh, Tech Mago squad. And to add a little bit of bonus here, because I know Randy, you love talking about line units. This does actually have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 line units. So if you're new to the game or just struggle with getting objectives, you have 9 line. You will never want for wanting to control of an
And a
objective.
3K list is amazing. I mean, I'd say the average in a 3K list is like 3 to 4 line units. So,
Yeah.
I mean, we're playing a game where more often than not, you're playing objective missions, and the more line, the better. And those
Well,
armored are hard to kill too. They're hard to kill. They're hard to move.
they are very interesting in their firepower choices, like the Melta or the autocannons. Both are very good choices, but are very specific and unique. Meltas are great for taking out Terminators, so just having a pair of them for dealing with a Terminator squad is great, even though you want to keep them far away. They're going to need to be objectives. But those 36-inch melt thermal lances are scary. Like they
Oh, yeah.
can reach out and touch people. And the Halverin Talon is just really great because those autocannons, even though you're only getting 4 shots off of a single paired gun, that is 4 dead Marines because they're strength 7
Your-
AP3.
Does the mech side of your list have any searchlights?
I do run 2 searchlights. One on the on the Castellixes, so the multi melta and Darkfire cannon Castellixes.
Because
So that is the
that's the biggest weakness with the knights is that they have no way
yes
to get night vision.
Mhm.
So having
that
those searchlights in your mech's part of your list to light
Yeah.
up for the
that
knights and the armigers is like key. You know,
it
if you're
is
that
very much key
range,
in this
if
case.
you're like night fighting game, like those things get neutered real fast. Especially it's crazy to me that the Questoris Knight can't get searchlights. Like
It is kind of weird, honestly, yeah, that they don't have, or at least have night fighting. I would imagine the big knights having night fighting, considering all the sensors that are stuck in their head.
most of them, it's not even an option. I think there's maybe one, right, John? There's like one knight that can get night vision.
The Mechanicus
What are the Mechanica
specific,
Knights? Yeah, the
Atrapos,
yeah
I think.
the Atropos, yeah, or those, yeah, that has night vision.
But none of the rest of them can even get a
I
searchlight.
don't think so. Yeah.
Yeah, big overshot
Crazy.
on the rules writing committee, but
Uh,
that to be honest, that is the weakest point of this list is night fighting. I only have 2 sources of searchlights, so it's gonna be a little rough if you're fighting night missions or if you're playing against night lords. Um, but I think overall it's a pretty decent list. Again, just for the idea of I'm trying to build a list quick and as cheap as possible, I think this works wonderfully. And I did get a chance to play it actually recently against a new Ultramarine player over in our one of our local areas. He was a nice guy I've known for years. Recently moved back from his adventures abroad, so it was nice catching up with him. I'm not going to name drop him because I don't know how he feels about confidentiality on the internet, but great playing with him. We had a great game, and it was a good learning lesson because he was learning kind of 30k. He plays it, but not often enough.
yeah,
And then it was good because this is the first outing for the list, and it did actually pretty well. Just kiting and able to kind of really just deal damage onto Marines.
yeah. I'm looking forward to playing against it. All right, John, do you want to go next? Or you want me to go?
I can talk about a list I was kind of cooking up. So I'm cooking up this Solar Ox Imperial Fist list, and this is actually a good example because when I think of a list, well, first I think of a Legion. I really play Heresy for the lore, and I want to play a Legion that I like the lore of or has good stories written from their perspective. So unfortunately, I don't think I'll ever play like an Iron Hands or like a Raven Guard list or a Salamander's list. Sorry, Reed, but I just haven't read any good stories with them, so it's hard for me to really get in the zone of like, oh yeah, I'm painting these cool dudes and playing games with them. So that's the first part. There needs to be some lore connection for me to build an army, and the next one is it has to be an army where I like to paint the color scheme because when I started playing Heresy, we were very like FPFO mentality, which is like fully painted or fuck off. Now that's just for me. Like if you don't play fully painted, like that's cool. But for me, because that's how I played Heresy, I always want to only play fully painted armies. So it has to be a scheme where like I will enjoy painting a bunch of Marines in this color. So this list is Imperial Fist, and I really did a lot of research on how to paint yellow because yellow, as we know, is a challenging color to paint. And I tried painting yellow before and it didn't work out quite as good. So that was years ago. But now with all these resources, I found some really good guides on painting good yellow. So first getting hyped on the lore of an army, and then finding an army where the color scheme is doable to paint. And then once I get that, I usually focus on a specific portion of the army and go from there. So like my word bearers, I got into that army with Argal Tall and 10 Galvor back. Like that was the core of my list. And for this one, it's 10 Huskarls and a Praetor with a fist. But the twist on this list is it's the Hammerfall Strike Force. So you could give your infantry deep strike by paying the points. So it's a primary Imperial Fist detachment, and then there's an allied contingent of Solar Ox. So it's themed to like Siege of Terra or maybe Siege of Cathonia kind of thing, where you have the Fist and the Solar Ox allies there. And essentially, the meat of the list is the 10 Huskarls and 2 Phalanx Warders all have deep strike. So this is like, a billion points in 30 models. And then there's an allied Solar Ox detachment. But the meat of the list is that Imperial Fist force. And like as approaching that list, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have 10 Huskarls. I'm gonna get all the bits for the Terminators, paint them, and go from there. And the list just revolves around the Solar Ox holding the line and Imperial Fist deep striking, looking cool. But for that, right, like, so they have to deep strike. Well, that means I have to get a Master Signal because, pro tip for all listeners, if your list has significant deep strike, like get a Master Signal. I played a lot of games with people where, it's a 3-up reserve roll, and they roll a 2 turn 1, and then they roll a 1 turn 3, and it's like, well, sorry, man, like there goes half your list. So make sure to get Master Signal. So
Even
I
with the
got
Master
that.
Signals, it's not a guarantee. My last game, I had a Master, or not a Master Signals, I had a Numerologist.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, the Thousand Suns Psychic Master Signals, and I still failed my reserves rolls for turns.
Oh gosh, sad face. Yeah, it could happen, but you always want to increase your chance as much as you can.
Yes,
Yeah, with
100%.
reserves. Yeah. But that's basically when I build the list. It's just I have the core, which is a really expensive unit or a theme. Like my Sons of Forest, the theme is the Justaran, so I have Justaran, and it goes from there. And yeah, I just kind of build around that. So like for this Imperial Fist list, well, I need line units because the Imperial Fist portion doesn't have lines. Okay, I'm getting Solar Ox infantry. Like, okay, I need long range anti tank. Like, okay, I'll get some Lehman Russes, or I'll get some laser or not laser destroyers. I'll get some Dracosins for the Solar Ox to transport them, so they can get the objectives. But yeah, so it's really just having a core and expanding from there is how I build my army, and kind of filling in holes as I build the core out. Right. Generally speaking, even if I'm not, obviously, if you're playing Space Marines, for the most part, you're picking like a Cannon Legion, But even like for the Solar Ox segment, I'm doing Saturnine Rams, which is, it's funny because Saturnine Rams was a Solar Ox regiment mentioned in the first Black Book that had Solar Ox. It had a good amount of lore, but there's no paint scheme. Like we got official paint scheme for this like 3 months ago or something, or 6 months ago when Warhammer Community released like a Saturnine Rams like article.
You were so excited about that. I remember.
Yes, I was, because like finally they have a Saturnine Rams paint scheme. I know what to do. But yeah, even for the non-legions like Solar Ox or my Mechanicum, I base them on a canon kind of color scheme. Now, if you guys are playing Mech or Solar Ox, like you don't have to do this. You could always just there's so many regiments, there's so many Forge Worlds. There is more creativity for sure with Solar Ox Militia and Mechanicum in your paint scheme for your army. Whereas for the legions, you're kind of for the most part locked to what their main scheme is. But yeah, for me, I still stick with some canon schemes. Like my Mechanicum force is Xana 2, which is like the bone color scorpion looking symbol for their knights kind of color scheme. If you guys have seen my Mechanicum, yeah, that's Xana 2. But yeah, that's like a quick summary of how I build lists is get hyped about the lore, find a paint scheme I like, and then get a core kind of center for the army and expand out, adding some stuff here and there.
Did you consider doing like Legion Auxilia for the Imperial Fists, or you always wanted it to just be like a separate allied detachment?
Use a separate ally attachment because I also want to eventually maybe expand that to like a full Solar Ox list, which I don't look forward to painting like 90 guys or whatever. But yeah, just for that. And also, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but for Legion Auxilia, you can't really take tanks and stuff, right? It's just the infantry, or
I'd have to look into that. I just got a couple infantry for like my Thousand Suns.
Yeah.
But
Or
yeah,
I think you just get the Legion Auxilia rules if you ally in with the main Legion. Let me grab my book, but
yeah, I think you just get I think you have that Legion Auxilia rules if you're allied, as long as you just declare it. Like you just have
Yeah,
to make sure
right.
you declare it as part of the list, but it has to be like the main detachment. So if you're Solar Aux allies and your main detachment is Imperial Fist, but you have allies Blood Angels, they have to be only Imperial Fist. I don't think they can take Blood Angel, even though those are an ally as well.
Oh,
If you're
yeah.
running like multiple allies.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. The allied detachment of the Solar Auxilia list included in a primary detachment with this Legion Astartes rule gets that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But if you take the new HQ with the Centurion, then they get the Legion Auxilia. But yeah, for the most part, your allied detachment can take the bonus rules from the Legion.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Folks, I think the Imperial Fist, it's a +1 to your cover save. I'm not sure if it's specifically for the Auxilia or for the Marines. But either way, that's, you could kind of build in some units to take advantage of that.
yeah, yeah. I'm reading them right now. Yeah, it's the line units in the Solar Aux detachment get +1 cover save.
Out of
Yeah.
Yeah,
curiosity, what are
pretty
you
solid.
running for the Solar Aux regiment? Are you running them as Solar Guard or Solar whatever it's called? I forget the name of it.
What do you mean? You mean the right of war thingy, or?
For the Auxilia, because I know you can give them a type based on the force commander. So it's like,
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. I do the really good one, which is they all get stubborn.
gotcha, okay,
I mean, I
Yeah.
feel like that's you have to because otherwise they just, I mean, even with that, they're still not great. But
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
break pretty
They're
fast.
just hard to hold the line. Now,
Yeah,
Vanquisher cannons are pretty good, but that's kind of it. It's like the two shot brutal two cannon on the Lehman Russ. It is ballistic skill 3. However, if you could add in a tank commander with a cognisignum to your 3-man Lehman Russ squadron, so they hit on threes, and with the coaxial autocannon, you also get the +1 to hit. So you're effectively hitting on twos, and they're kind of good against red knots. 3 or 6 brutal two shots. Like I think they're like strength 9. So
right.
yeah,
Was coaxial +1 to the hit, or was I thought coaxial was reroll
is a reroll.
hitters?
It could be
Right.
reroll.
coaxial, if you hit with the coaxial, then your main cannon becomes twin linked.
Oh,
That's what
which
it
is
is.
even better.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Like you
that.
get to
That
reroll misses.
yeah,
Yeah.
then it's reroll threes, which is really good. Yeah, but other than that, like the infantry, they're just there to hold the line and die and score me points, survive until the Husk girls come in.
Stubborn, what is it, like stubborn 11? It's like you're not ready, you're not shifting those guys off an objective.
Yeah, absolutely not. They are holding the line. You got to chew through the measly toughness 3 up save bodies.
Yeah. How
Yeah,
many troops are you running?
it's like 40 dudes.
Oof.
Yeah,
Hmm.
That's a like I painted 20 and I was ready to kill myself after that.
it's funny because I have the old Forge World ones, and
Oh,
they're like not as detailed as the new ones, which I'm kind of glad for.
Oh
So
yeah.
I have 20 of those, so it's like okay, this is not as bad because I looked at
how
the new models and it's like, geez, there's so
They're
much detail.
beautiful, but they're smaller than Marines and they're more detailed than Marines.
Yeah,
So
I
it's
was gonna
like
say, how do the old resin models pair up against the new plastic ones? Are like the same size and everything, or is there like a size discrepancy between them?
I
Uh,
believe they're slightly shorter,
okay.
like slightly shorter.
are their
Yeah.
proportions decent though? Like is it
Are
or is it like wonky like the old Marines are?
say again the proportions? The proportions are fine. Yeah, because they're humans. So I think the new ones have better proportions, but yeah, these ones aren't as bad at all compared to like old Marines, like old Mark IV, especially.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah,
So, John, I got a question. Since you're doing
yeah.
yours as an ally list, why choose again Solar Aux other than maybe say running more Marines like Blood Angels to help shore up the defenses?
It's like a thematic thing. I wanted to do. I actually just uploaded an older version of the list, but because the new one's on my work computer. But just like I want to do Solar Aux. Yeah, I like the concept of Solar Auxilia. As I have ranted on this podcast before, I love the non-marine part of heresy a bit. Recently, I've been loving that recently, so I wanted to start a Solar Aux army. But I think going ham, like a full-on 3K list, cold turkey was kind of too much for me. So I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, let's do like an allied detachment and then go from there.
Also, like it's very themey, like because one of the things that you don't rarely see on the tabletop, at least in 28 mil heresy, but is very much in the lore, is like every legion had shit ton of solar rocks with
Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
Someone had to
they were
garrison those
they were
worlds.
the spear tip, but they were usually hundreds of thousands of solar rocks in their crusade forces.
Hmm.
But like that's not usually very well represented in our tabletop game, but it's nice to see some solar rocks mixed in because it's like, yeah, there were a shit ton of these guys there. I mean, they were cannon fodder and they they died
Yeah,
easy, but there were so many of them.
exactly.
There's a lot of big battles where it's like, the solar rocks, there might not be turning the tide, but they're definitely there, doing their thing.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. So I just wanted that kind of theme there. One, to start Solar Ox Army, and two, like Randy mentioned, it's cool to see Marines and their mortal allies on the battlefield.
And also it's nice because um just the perspective of like most often in the game, I mean in the lore, you like the Marines are, the superhuman soldiers of humanity, but like when you're only fighting against other Marines and even against mech, you're not necessarily seeing that on the tabletop, but I feel like it does come across better when you're playing against Solar Rocks. They are better. And then definitely there's a little bit of a skew in the game because of that, but it makes sense. Like there should be Marines should be able to kind of chew through these guys, and it's kind of fun.
Exactly. No, yeah,
As a
exactly.
Marine player to like, oh yeah, like this tactical squad's chewing through these Solar Rocks. Good. Finally, they're good against something,
I know. Meanwhile, in like a Legion v Legion game, they're just kind of rolling bolters, and you're just passing your 3-up saves, and they're just like, "Cool, I'm holding an objective, hooray!"
Bounce, bounce, bounce. All those
Yeah,
shots bouncing off power armor.
yeah,
Cool.
All right, no.
I guess I will do mine now.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
this is one that actually, if you watched our first battle report, you have seen this list or like a version of this list. This is my Luna Wolves list, and this is probably my most themey list. I think with all the armies I've done so far, for the most part, it's been based around a specific battle. And Loken, at least for me, is one of the coolest characters in Heresy. He's there from the beginning. He's I think he's very well written and he's a very noble guy that a lot of crappy shit has happened to, and he's very relatable and likable. And so I had from the very beginning wanted to do a Loken Istvan 3 list at some point. And Beto and I had talked about doing like he would do Sons of Horus and I would do Luna Wolves. So we decided to split the Abaddon Loken, Forge World box set. And this was like early on. And I think I bought it and didn't touch the model for at least a year. I was working on other stuff. But then I finally was like, like I want to do this. I want to do an Istvan 3 Luna Wolves list. I think the Luna Wolves color scheme is really cool, and I don't particularly like the Sons of Horus scheme. So I wanted to make a point of having my list not have any of like the Sons of Horus big iconography, like getting rid of I shaved off, the Eye of Horus stuff on his knee pads, on his shoulder
Mm.
plate. I switched out his shoulder pad that had that big Eye of Horus on it. And my kind of head canon for this list, which is what it started with, right? Because I feel like it's a nice juxtaposition from Esteban's, where it's like, I'm starting with this box. This is where the list is starting from. For me, it was very much this idea of this is an Esteban 3 Lunawolf's force that has basically had the crap kicked out of them. And these are the survivors who have managed to make it into the underground bunkers. And while they were sat in there, they basically repainted their armor and
Mm.
grimy and dirty and just like kind of fucked up. And a lot of them, they're kind of using broken armor and they're using replacement parts from other kits that don't necessarily fit with their current scheme. So what I wanted to do was to make a force that didn't have any tanks. Which had nothing to do with the fact that tanks are crap in this edition. Mainly because I was like, these are the people who made it into the bunkers, right? And I think that land raiders probably weren't fitting into the bunkers super easily. You
Yeah.
had mainly infantry and a couple speeders and a couple dreadnoughts was what I wanted to do. So it kind of coincided with the new Battle Force box set that had dropped. I guess it's not so new anymore, but at the time it was new. It was the new Mark III set that had uh, the Land Raider and the Dreadio and the like I think it was like 30 Mark III Marines. So I got one of those, uh, and I was like, all right, this is kind of be gonna be the backbone of my list. And I had from the Age of Darkness box set, I had a bunch of extra cataphracti because I don't really think generic cataphracti are that good, and they've just kind of been sitting from my Age of Dark, one of my Age of Darkness box sets for a long time. And I was like, this is a perfect way to build up some Justarin that are not so like because I wanted it to be an elite force, right? So like I wanted Justarin, I wanted Reavers. These are like the people who are like good enough to have survived this long. But again, like I said with Loken, like I didn't want to get the resin models, A, because they're old and they're small, but also because they have the Sons of Horus crap all over them. And I didn't want to pay $100 for 5 models and then spend hours carving off the Eye of Horus. So instead, I used Mark III models as the base for the Reavers and bought some axes and pistols and heads that I could use to represent them as Reavers and like paint them, with gold on their shoulder pads to represent that they were elites. And then the same thing with the Justarin. I had a friend like 3D print me some of the uh, halberds, which are the rules for those are great, and then some thunder hammers and did some head swaps, and I was able to use these generic guys, have them be represented as just Aaron and Reavers, and save a lot of money because you're not paying hundreds of dollars for the Forge World models. So I had like 2 5-man Just Aaron squads, a Reaver squad, and then a Reaver Aggressor squad, which are basically the same thing but with jump packs. And I use like the new Mark Sixes for those. And then I decided to do the Black Reaving Rite of War because that's makes Reavers troops. And again, it comes back to like these are basically most of these guys who are left are the elites. So it made sense for me that like Reavers are basically their troops. So I needed a Master of Signals for that. So I did a 5-man las cannon squad because I didn't want to go like crazy overboard with the las cannons, but I needed some extra hard hitting anti tank in the list. And then the one concession I made to like, getting like Forge Worldy stuff is the speeders. Like there's 2 javelins, 2 Proteuses and because the idea is without tanks, I need some fast stuff in this list, some stuff that can get around the board, that can, So I was trying to balance the theminess of it with practicality in a game. Like, how do I make this list work without transports? Like being able to get across the board, being able to shoot stuff down. So it was about just making a fast list. And the Justarin have native deep strike, which is great. I can kind of just drop them in the board wherever they need to go and not have them hoof it up the board. And then I had a despoiler squad as well. And for my despoilers, my las cannons, what I did was like I did a lot of bits swapping. Like I swapped out heads, I swapped out arms, I swapped out like legs and backpacks so that each one of them has bits from different armor marks to represent the fact that these guys are literally picking through the remnants of dead Marines to like keep their armor going. So, and then I did for the Justarin some, I'm not going to pronounce it right, the Katsugi, like basically like they have like gold lines on their armor to represent the fact that it's been like cracked and they re-plastered it together.
Mm-hmm.
I don't love the way it looks, so I didn't do it on everything, but I kept it on the Justarin because it was too much effort to take it off. But
Fair enough.
just I did as much as I could to represent the fact that they have been through hell and their armor is like fucked up. And also, this was the first time I tried a new paint scheme. Like before this, like my Ultramarines and my Thousand Sons, their armor paint scheme was like very clean. And this one, I like tried like Metters Miniatures had like a really good like sponge technique, really grimy paint scheme for his white scars that I decided to basically co-opt for the Luna Wolves and just swap out the red for black because they have a very simple color scheme, like the black and white, which looks really nice, and it's simple enough that it's pretty easy to do for a lot of infantry. And then I had the 2 Duretios. I got like a second Duretio to kind of help have some extra fire support. So I feel like it's like a nice balanced list. It's not too over the top. The problem that I've had with it that I've realized in a lot of games is that because Loken and I run him with the River Squad on foot because they don't have a transport. When I'm playing against guys who have good shooting, they basically end up getting stuck in cover in my deployment zone because otherwise it just becomes a really easy warlord kill. You're just trying to run them
Mm.
off the board without anything, they just get shot to hell. So that was a little bit of a miscalculation building the list, but it's also, I I just love having Loken on there. And also his rules kind of suck, unfortunately. Like he's got like a decent warlord trait that affects his unit, but you have to get his unit into combat. So like the few times they've gotten into combat has been cool, but a lot of the time they're basically hiding through
Mm.
most of the game so he doesn't get shot off the board. But yeah, I think that's kind of the my thought process for that list was like I really started with the theme and being like this I want this to be an Istvan 3 thing. Because also Loken becomes a knight errant after Istvan 3 and he's never part of like a big army again. So that's really the only place you can do that with him. So like that was what made sense for me. And doing the Luna Wolves, which like I love their color scheme, like the background for them is really cool. And even in the book, in the rules, one of Loken's titles is like the last Luna Wolf. So it's kind of
Mm.
paying homage to that for his color scheme and them just being like, fuck Horus.
Mm.
We're going back to our roots.
Right, right. So really, Randy, this is less of a list that you've built for gaming in general, but more of a very thematic showpiece kind of army, right? Like this is something that captures a moment in the heresy that you enjoy, that you really appreciate. And this is almost more of like an art project for you, almost rather than an army list, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, first and foremost was the theme, but I mean, it has some teeth to it. Like, it's not like this is not an ass-kicking list, right? But it is one that can hold its own.
Yeah,
And
you're not like running Castaferum with heavy bolters, like they have last cannons because last cannons are pretty
yeah,
solid
like
on
I've got
them.
a Kalash
Right.
Flame with last, like there's last cannons in it. There's graviton guns in it. There's
Yeah.
multi-meltas, you know. So it's not oppressive in any one thing, but I think it's relatively balanced. So I did try to like it was secondary. Like the first thing for me was like the theme, and like once I had the theme, I was like, all right, like how do I make this list not suck? Because I like my games to be competitive. I don't want to completely destroy my opponent, but I also don't want to get completely destroyed. So I wanted this to be a list where it's like, in the average game when we're both being like, all right, let's bring, decent stuff and not go overboard. That's kind of where this list thrives, is like playing against other balanced lists. I think if someone was to bring a dick kicker list, this list could not survive. But if we're playing like a balanced, themey narrative game, this list does pretty well.
Yeah, I actually want to comment on that because I think that's an important thing to bring up with people building heresy lists where you don't want to just rule of cool everything. I mean, rule of cool is rule of cool, but like you don't want to play a game where you do nothing because all you took were again like heavy bolter contemptors and like I don't know like Melta support squads and autocannon heavy support squads and you just absolutely demolished by something, right? Like make sure you know what the good stuff is in heresy and then also find a way to not just take all good stuff but also make sure your list has some teeth and can do well and not just absolutely get shit stomped in a couple turns.
Yeah.
Like don't get Footslog and Cataphracti because they will just do nothing, for example, right?
Yeah. And we've
Right.
actually,
Yeah.
this is a good thing to bring up again, 'cause we've mentioned this before in previous podcasts, but it's worth repeating because of the way heresy is designed, and not every legion is created equal. What's theming in one legion could be great, and what's theming in another legion could be garbage. So I think it is important. And look, if you're a newer player, you're going to get a lot of slack with building your first list, and whether it's good or bad, like no one's going to give you crap about that. If you're new, just build what you can, get some experience with the games, and you'll learn. But if you're a more experienced player building your second or third army, I think it is important to balance the theme with the practicality of the gameplay. I don't want to like beat a dead horse with like the Imperial fists, but like, yes, it's building a stone gauntlet list is technically themey, but maybe do it in a way where you're not just running 3 or 4 squads of Phalanx Wardens, throw some breachers in there. Something like that, where you're like, if that's what you really want to build, if you really want that kind of list, no one's gonna tell you you can't, but just do it in a way where it's fun for your opponent. Or if you are building like a themey like Blood Angels list, it's okay to bring some harder hitting units because they struggle on the tabletop a little bit. So that's one of the things is getting when you're more experienced in the game and knowing what needs help versus what needs to be toned down. And it's okay to balance the theme with that because at the end of the day, like this is a game, and I think the most enjoyment that, at least for me, that I get out of it personally is when we have a close game. And the best way to do that is to have your lists be like equally balanced.
Yeah, no, definitely makes sense.
Do you guys have any closing thoughts?
Closing thoughts. I think the important thing to, I think, remind people, especially when they're coming to the end of this video, is that there is no really correct or incorrect way to build lists. These are just three different considerations that have been made into building a list. Again, me with my how can I make my dollar and easiest purchases go through. Randy with his very pick a specific moment theme and build off that and make it playable. And then John with his, again, very similar, pick a thing, make it viable, and then figure out what you need in order to build it. I think these are all perfectly fine ways to build, both for experienced and new players. There's no wrong way. The only really wrong way is to play Heresy wrong in the first place, which is building a dick kicker list without care for your opponent's fun, which I think is maybe the hardest thing in his Heresy to either find or to counter, because there's not a lot of people who play Heresy who I don't enjoy the game with. And those few really kind of understand after a few interactions, like, oh, people aren't enjoying my games. It's because I'm doing something kind of weird. And I think that's really the heart of it.
Yeah, it's what we were saying before. It's all about balance. It's
Yep.
about having good units balanced with maybe some not so good units, and that could be the fluffy part of your list potentially. And I think that's one of the ways to go out building a theming list is, for every unit that's like a dick kicker in your list, maybe bring something that's fluffy and not as good. For my list, I think the Reavers are, as an elite unit, they're kind of weak.
Hmm.
You balance them with the Justarin, who as an elite unit are pretty good. They're one of the better ones. So they kind of balance each other out because the Reavers, they're coming with chain axes, which is barely better than Despoilers.
Hmm. Hmm.
Or like you could upgrade them all to have more stuff, but then they become a very expensive unit.
Yeah.
And they're already a bit overpriced as it is. So I think they're fun and they're themey, but because I'm taking them, I'm balancing that out with the Just Aaron and having the speeders that have las cannons and the Castafarum with las cannons. And so that's kind of the give and take of the list. And I think every list you should be able to find that balance, you know.
I will say, whatever you guys do, whatever list you make, whether it's like a thematic list with a specific moment, or you're trying to build a list on a budget, or you have a really cool character and you're building around him, whatever you do, paint your models. Fully
Yeah.
painted list is always way
Paint-
cooler than a partially
paint your
painted list.
models.
Like paint your
John,
models, friends.
I swear I'm getting them to at least
Yep.
look this good for a Heresy event. It's just taking me a long time to paint freaking Thalaxes. They suck at being painted, I swear.
Really? I guess it depends on the scheme. I don't know why, like I struck gold with my Mechanicum scheme is so easy to paint. I just struck gold with that. Like that happened to be a Forge World where I liked the scheme and it was easy to paint. So
So
thanks,
like-
Games Workshop.
I was gonna say I shot myself in the foot with this. I wanted to try to go with a really weird metallic blend, so I'm doing 3 different metallics on
Oh,
my
geez.
models. That's what's killing me, honestly, because I want them to look very unique from every angle. So no matter what you look at this, like the model looks different no matter what angle you look at it. Like it's got mostly red armor panels, but all the main metal components are all rough iron from Army Painter, and I've got a lot of true copper and a lot of like the helmet and like gun pieces and thrusters, and then I've got shining silver on some of the joint pieces and the thruster, and then mixes of them all in between, mixed and matched. It looks really cool because now like all the metallics jump out at different reflectivities and kind of give it this really kind of good look that I like. But my God, does it take forever to do?
That's
I
fair.
think I spent like maybe an hour on 2 Thalaxes just getting them up to like kind of halfway to where I like them, but there's so much cleanup to do. And to be honest, I'm kind of reconsidering my main armor color because I'm doing all red with a single black shoulder pad for the Thalaxes. I think it looks nice because it kind of again allows them to flip either as traitor or loyalist, really. Um, the problem is now that I got to this point, I need to think about transfers and stuff, and now I'm starting to reconsider how I'm going to get those on there because I'm starting to think, oh no, these transfers aren't going to look pretty on this, and it's like I shot myself in the foot.
That's actually like a good point to bring up though, is that I mean John touched on this briefly, like when you are starting a new army, like your paint scheme is actually very important. Like
Yep.
obviously, hopefully you're picking an army that you like the look of, but sometimes, I mean, it depends on your painting level. Like if you've painted certain things before, you're trying something new. I think it's important to do at least a couple test models
Yep.
with the scheme that you're trying. Make sure A, it's something that you're capable of doing. Because like with our paint levels, some things are a lot harder to do than others. And if you're really struggling to paint one test model, you there's a good chance you might just get frustrated and abandon the project halfway through if you're just like, this is just not something I enjoy doing. You know,
Yeah,
so make sure that it's
absolutely.
a paint scheme that like you like, that you enjoy doing, that's not too complicated for you. Because I mean, at least for me personally, like it doesn't matter how much I like the paint scheme, I get really tired of it after like 20, 30 models. So just having it be not too over the top is really important for me to like be able to push myself through and keep going, you know?
Hmm. Makes
Um,
No,
sense.
no, yeah, for sure. I'm actually that's kind of where I'm at right now because I've got everything primed and these are the four test Thalaxes before I commit. So I'm thinking about changing it. I'm just trying to see if I can get the four of them painted, see if how they look with transfers, and then make my final decision after that. Because if I have to redo four Thalaxes, that's better than doing the whole 12 lot as well as the Castellix models because the Castellix are what are going to be kind of like the bigger test of that. And then ultimately the Thanatar is going to be the big upscale of that, which I think the Thanatar would look a lot better with this scheme because it's so much bigger where that differentiation of metals would probably look better. It's just the pain of doing it on the Thalax is what's killing me right now. But
yeah.
if I can just muscle through it and decide that I like it after putting the transfers on, I might just muscle through the last eight Thalaxes and then everything else should be easier because once you get to like the Castellix and the Thanatar, like that's really it. That's it for the color scheme. The knights I have to just kind of touch up because they're older knight models that just need to get some paint job corrections on them just because they've been sitting around for so long. They've gathered a lot of dust and maybe just need to get their colors fixed a little bit. And then I'm pretty much done with the list as far as painting.
Yeah. I mean, for me, and again, everyone goes their own process. When I first started 40K when I was in like middle school, I did what a lot of people do was like I built everything, had this giant gray army, and then overwhelmed by the process of painting and just never finished painting anything that I did. So like when I got back into it a few years ago, like I've decided I was like I have to paint as I build, otherwise I'll never finish painting anything. So I literally just and I'll take a picture like on my table right now. I'm working on my Emperor's Children. I paint everything sub-assembly. It's literally just like a pile of bits on my table, and I will not glue the rest of this model together until it is fully painted.
Hmm.
And like that's how I've been able to do all my stuff and have fully painted armies.
I wish I could do that because I did that once when I was playing. When I had my Death Watch built and painted for 8th edition and 9th edition Warhammer, I did a lot of that and I absolutely hated it because I would constantly lose pieces and then not be able to track which arms went to which models. I can't go back to that. I have to just have everything assembled and painted off there because it's just trying to make the jigsaw work just doesn't work for me. It's just so much work.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to what we've been talking about this whole time, which is like finding what works for you. And every
Hmm.
person is going to have their own method.
Yep.
And like, once you figure that out, you just stick to it, and hopefully that helps you power through and get to 3,000 points.
Exactly. Yeah. Ugh. And now there's two Battle Force boxes sitting in the corner of my room waiting to become a Sons of Horus. I just have to actually build them. I'm just waiting to get those Mechanicus done because I actually didn't like my original Horus test models. So I'm like, I'm gonna wait until nothing's mechanical before I go back to try Sons of Horse again.
You can do it. We believe in you.
I will eventually.
All right.
Sure.
I think that's a good place to probably call it for tonight.
I think it is. Yeah.
Mhm.
Gave everybody some inspiration. Let us know if you guys have anything you guys are working on. Give us some comments. Let us know what you thought of this. If you have any thoughts, feedback, anything you want us to talk about in the future. Uh, and we'll see you guys all in the next one.
Paint your models.